Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and I'm really happy you're here with me today. Whether you're walking, commuting, cooking, or just relaxing with your headphones, thank you for choosing this moment to practice your English. This podcast is your space to learn, reflect, and grow in your language journey. We know how challenging it can be to learn English, not just the grammar and vocabulary, but actually speaking it with confidence, clarity, and flow. And that's exactly what we're focusing on today. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you know the words, but still can't express yourself clearly in English? Like, the sentence is in your mind, but when you try to speak, it comes out in a strange or confusing way? Maybe you hesitate. Maybe you search for the perfect word and get stuck. Maybe you say something, but the other person doesn't really understand you. That can feel frustrating, right? It's like you've studied so much, yet in the moment you freeze. If that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. This is something so many people go through. I've heard it from students in Rome, in Warsaw, in Budapest, and even in smaller cities like Ghent or Porto. They say, Julia, I can read and write, I understand podcasts and movies, but when I try to speak, I get nervous. My words don't come out right. And you know what? That's not your fault. It doesn't mean you're bad at English. It doesn't mean you need more grammar books. Most of the time, it just means you haven't practiced the right kind of speaking, natural, everyday communication. That's what we're going to work on together. Our theme today is how to improve your communication skills in English. Not just how to sound more fluent, but how to actually connect with people when you speak. How to be understood. How to keep a conversation going. How to feel confident and relaxed, even if you make small mistakes. Because let's be honest, perfection is not the goal. Communication is. We're going to look at simple ways to speak more clearly. I'll share with you stories of people who struggled with the same problem and how they changed their habits. These aren't advanced techniques from textbooks. These are real strategies you can start using today. You won't need hours of extra study, just a shift in how you think and practice. And I'll be here with you every step of the way. Let me also remind you of something important. Your accent doesn't need to disappear. Your sentence structure doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to sound like a native speaker. You just need to be understood. That's it. And the more you focus on clarity, the more confident you'll feel. So today's episode is all about helping you move in that direction. Now, before we jump into the stories and tips, I want you to think about your own experience for a moment. When was the last time you felt unsure while speaking English? Maybe it was during a work call, maybe at a restaurant while traveling, or maybe just ordering coffee in a cafe. What made that moment difficult? Was it the vocabulary? Was it the speed? Was it a lack of confidence? Take a second to remember that situation, because as we go through this episode, I want you to keep it in mind. The goal is to give you tools that help you feel more prepared next time that kind of moment happens. And here's something else I want you to remember as we go forward. English is not just a language for tests or school. It's a tool for real life, for connecting with people, making friends, sharing ideas, asking questions, solving problems. That's the kind of English we talk about here. So if you've ever felt frustrated with formal lessons or traditional classrooms, this podcast is for you. Many people learn English for years but still avoid speaking. Why? Because they're afraid of saying something wrong. They don't want to be judged, they don't want to sound silly. But here's the truth. Speaking is a skill. And like any skill, the only way to improve it is to use it. You don't learn to swim by reading a book. You learn by getting in the water. It's the same with communication. You need practice, not perfection. So today, I invite you to listen closely, not just with your ears, but with your experience. You're going to hear relatable stories, practical advice, and easy strategies to help you speak more clearly and confidently. You'll find that you don't need more complicated words. You just need the right words. You don't need to speak faster. You need to speak smarter. And you don't need to sound like someone else. You need to sound like you in English. As we go on, I'll also share a few questions for you to think about. These are not tests. They're just small reflections to help you connect what you hear to your own life. So even if you're just listening casually right now, let these questions stay with you. Maybe you'll think about them later today or tomorrow during your next English conversation. All right, ready to start? Let's take a deep breath together. In and out. You're here. You're doing something good for yourself. You're not just learning English, you're building your confidence, your skills, and your future. And I'm really proud of you for that. Let's get started. Let's talk about something really important today. Something that might completely change the way you think about speaking English. Communication. Real, clear, honest communication. Because the truth is, speaking English well isn't about being perfect. It's not about using fancy words or long sentences. It's not about sounding like someone else. It's about connection. That's the real goal. Being able to express an idea clearly, to understand someone, and to feel understood. That's what makes communication successful, and that's what really matters. You see, so many English learners believe they need to sound advanced before they can have good conversations. They feel pressure to use complex grammar or memorize long vocabulary lists. But here's the truth. Complexity often creates confusion. In real conversations, whether you're in a meeting, at a train station, or chatting with a friend, what works best is being clear, not being perfect. The people who communicate well in English are not always the ones with the biggest vocabulary. They're the ones who keep it simple and speak with confidence. Think about the last time you listened to someone explain something in English. Did you understand them better when they used long, complicated sentences, or when they spoke slowly with clear, short ideas? In most cases, simplicity wins. When people speak in a natural rhythm and choose easy-to-understand phrases, we connect with them faster. The message is stronger. There's less room for confusion. That's why simple sentences are not just beginner English. They are effective English. There's a big difference between knowing English and actually communicating in English. Knowing English might mean you understand vocabulary, grammar, reading, but communicating means you can take what you know and use it naturally in real life. It means being able to say something clearly in the moment, even if you're nervous, even if you don't have the exact word. Communication is a skill, and like all skills, it improves with practice and with purpose. Let me give you a quick example. Imagine someone says, "Due to a previous engagement, I'm regrettably unavailable at this particular moment." Sounds formal, right? But now imagine they say, "Sorry, I'm busy right now." The second version is simple, but it's also much clearer. In real life, the second one is what most native speakers would use. It's fast, easy to understand, and straight to the point. Many learners try to impress people by using advanced words, but real communication isn't about impressing. It's about connecting. If you use a complicated word and the other person doesn't understand it, then communication breaks. If you use a simple word and they get your message, then you've succeeded. It's that simple. And this doesn't mean you should stop learning new words. It just means you should learn to choose the right ones for the situation. Sometimes the right word is a short word. Sometimes the best sentence is the simplest sentence. If your goal is to be understood, then clarity is always more valuable than complexity. There's something else I want to highlight here. When you keep your message clear and simple, you also build more confidence. You're less afraid of making mistakes. You stop trying to translate every sentence from your first language. You start to think in English, not just speak it. That's a powerful shift. And it often starts with small changes, like choosing shorter phrases or pausing between your ideas. In fact, clear communication can even help you sound more fluent. Because when you speak clearly and calmly, people listen more closely. They follow your thoughts. They feel comfortable with the way you speak. And the more comfortable your listener feels, the more confident you'll feel too. It becomes a positive circle. Another important thing is that clarity allows more space for real connection. When you're not focused on showing off vocabulary, you can focus on the other person. You can listen better. You can respond in a natural way. You can be present in the conversation. That's what true communication looks like. It's not just talking, it's understanding and being understood. And that only happens when the message is clear. So many people around the world are speaking English every day. Some learned it in school, some from travel, others from movies or work. But no matter how you learned, what truly makes a difference is how you use the language. And using it with the goal of clarity, being heard, being understood, creating a connection, that's what leads to real progress. One of the things I hear often from learners is this: I study every day, but I still can't speak well. And usually, the reason is not because they haven't studied enough. It's because they've been focusing on the wrong things. Memorizing words isn't the same as learning to use words. Studying grammar rules isn't the same as building confidence in conversation. It's like having a full toolbox but never using the tools. So today, I want to remind you that what matters most isn't the number of words you know. It's how clearly you can use the ones you already have. If you can say what you mean using short, natural sentences, you are already a strong communicator. That's something to be proud of. You don't need to wait until your English is perfect to start speaking. You can start now, exactly where you are. Speak slowly, use small words, repeat yourself if you need to. What matters is that the person in front of you understands what you're trying to say. And often, they will appreciate your effort even more because you are making the conversation easier for them too. So the next time you're in a conversation, I want you to focus on one thing: clarity. Not perfection, not speed, not advanced vocabulary, just clarity. Take your time. Say less if it helps. Use simple phrases. Look for understanding, not performance. Because when people understand you, you connect. And when you connect, you succeed. Let me share a story with you today. It's about a listener from Madrid named Matteo. His experience is something many of you might relate to. Matteo is a systems engineer working at an international tech company. From the outside, you'd think he had everything he needed to be fluent in English. He studied it for years. He read articles and watched tech conferences in English every week. He could write well. He had a strong vocabulary. But whenever it came time to speak with his colleagues, especially in meetings or calls, something would happen. He froze. His mind would go blank. Words would disappear. He told me, "I know the words. I just can't find them when I need them." That frustration stayed with him for years. Matteo was the kind of person who always wanted to be prepared. He studied hard. He even memorized business phrases, hoping they would help him sound more professional. But when real conversations happened, especially with native speakers or faster talkers, he couldn't keep up. He started to avoid speaking. He would send emails instead of joining calls. In meetings, he kept his answers short, afraid of making mistakes. He wasn't shy by nature, but English made him feel unsure of himself. Every time he wanted to say something, he asked himself, "Is this the right word? Will I sound strange? Will they understand me?" And while he was busy overthinking, the moment to speak would pass. This situation started to affect his confidence, not just in English, but at work too. He began to feel smaller in conversations, less visible in group projects. Even though his ideas were valuable, they weren't reaching others. That's when he realized something had to change. He didn't want to stay silent anymore, so he started searching for a better way to approach speaking. That's when Matteo came across a simple but powerful idea. Communication is not about using impressive words. It's about being understood. That one thought changed everything for him. He told me, "I was always trying to sound fluent, but what I needed was to be clear." So instead of memorizing more phrases, he focused on expressing ideas in the simplest way possible. He stopped trying to translate perfect sentences in his head. Instead, he practiced building short, clear thoughts. If he didn't know a word, he used another one he did know. If he felt nervous, he slowed down. If he made a mistake, he repeated the sentence with more confidence. He also started doing something small but very effective. Before meetings, he would prepare 2 or 3 ideas he wanted to share, but this time in his own words, simple words. Not the kind of sentences you find in textbooks, but things he would say naturally in Spanish, just translated into easy English. For example, instead of saying, "I would like to raise a concern regarding the project timeline," he would say, "I think the schedule is a bit tight." He stopped worrying about sounding perfect and started focusing on making his message clear. That small shift had a big impact. At first, it was still a challenge. Old habits don't disappear overnight. But Matteo began to notice something. When he spoke clearly and calmly, people responded better. They asked him more questions. They included him more. His confidence started to grow, not because his vocabulary got bigger, but because his words were finally reaching people. The communication was real. One moment that really stood out for him happened during a client meeting. It was his turn to explain a technical update. Before, he would have read from his notes full of long sentences he didn't feel comfortable with, but this time he took a different approach. He said, "We changed the way the system works. Now it's faster and easier to use. Let me show you." It was simple, direct, and confident. And it worked. The client understood. His manager complimented him after the meeting. That was the moment he knew this new approach was working. What Matteo discovered is something I want you to remember. You don't have to speak fast to be fluent. You don't have to use long sentences to be taken seriously. You don't have to hide your voice behind fear. What you need is clarity. You need to feel free to speak in a way that feels natural to you. Simple language is strong. It makes space for connection. And that's what real communication is all about. Over time, Mateo's relationship with English changed. He still learns new vocabulary when he needs to. He still reads and watches content in English. But his goal is no longer to sound advanced. His goal is to speak so people understand him the first time. That goal gives him peace, it gives him purpose, and it gives him the courage to speak more often. And the results? They've been real. He now leads short presentations in English. He joins international calls without trying to hide. He even started mentoring new team members, some of whom are also non-native speakers. He says that now, when he speaks, he feels present. He feels heard. And more than anything, he feels that he is finally part of the conversation. His story is a great reminder that speaking English is not about showing off what you know. It's about letting people know who you are. And often, the most powerful way to do that is to speak simply, clearly, and with confidence in your own voice. Matteo didn't need more English. He needed a new mindset. And once he found it, everything began to change. One of the most important habits you can build to improve your English communication is learning to use short, clear sentences. This idea may sound simple, but it can completely change the way people understand you and how confident you feel when you speak. So many learners think that the more advanced they get, the longer their sentences should be. But the truth is, clarity matters more than complexity. When you choose short, direct language, you reduce confusion and increase connection. You give your listener exactly what they need to understand your message, and that's what good communication is all about. Let's talk about why this happens. When you speak in long, complicated sentences, especially in a second language, there's a higher chance you'll lose your way. You might forget how the sentence started or which verb you were using. You might hesitate, repeat yourself, or fill the space with and while you try to think. This is normal. Even native speakers do it sometimes. But when you learn to say things in a shorter, more structured way, you keep your message clear and your mind feels more organized. I always say, short and clear often beats long and confusing. Think about that for a second. It's not about using fewer words just to be brief. It's about choosing the right words so your listener doesn't have to work hard to understand you. That's what makes someone a great communicator. And yes, this applies to professional settings too. You don't need to sound like a textbook or a lawyer to speak well. In fact, some of the best communicators in the world are the ones who make complex ideas feel easy to understand. Let's look at a few practical examples together. Imagine you want to say, "In my opinion, the project could benefit from additional resources in order to improve efficiency and meet the upcoming deadline." That's a lot of words. And while it's not incorrect, it's heavy and hard to follow, especially in a fast-paced conversation. A shorter and clearer version might be, "We need more help to finish on time." Same message, much easier to understand. The first version sounds formal, the second version sounds real. Here's another one. Instead of saying, "I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who contributed to the completion of this task," you can simply say, "Thanks to everyone who helped." It's still polite, it's still professional, but it's direct. It's the kind of sentence that makes your message clear right away. Now let's think about daily conversations. Imagine you're talking to a colleague and you say, "I am not entirely sure whether or not the system update was completed successfully." That's okay, but again, long. Instead, you can say, "I'm not sure if the update worked." This version is simple and clear, and it gets your point across with no confusion. In situations where time matters, like team calls, messages, or customer service, using short and clear sentences like this makes everything smoother. Here's one more. Instead of saying, "I'm reaching out to request additional information regarding the status of our shipment," you can say, "Can you update me on the shipment?" Shorter, faster, and easier for the listener to respond to. When your goal is communication, not performance, short and simple is your best friend. Sometimes learners avoid short sentences because they worry it might sound too basic. But that's not true. Short sentences can sound strong, smart, and confident when you say them clearly. Listen to how native speakers talk in real life. You'll notice they often speak in short bursts. "Let's do it tomorrow. I'll check and let you know." That sounds good to me. It's not fancy, but it works. It keeps the conversation flowing and makes things feel natural. A lot of learners also believe that using advanced vocabulary shows they are fluent, but the real test of fluency is whether people can understand you without effort. If someone has to stop and ask you to repeat what you just said, then it doesn't matter how advanced your words are. What matters is connection. When you speak clearly, people feel that you're talking to them, not at them. And that creates trust. One technique I recommend is rewriting your own sentences. Start by saying what you want to say the way it comes to your mind, even if it's long. Then ask yourself, how would I say this to a friend? Often the answer is much shorter. Practice this with real situations. Before a meeting or a phone call, prepare a few key ideas and write them in short sentences. Use simple words and focus on your main message. This helps you stay confident when it's time to speak. Another helpful strategy is to listen and copy. Choose an English speaker you like, maybe from a podcast or a video, and pay attention to how they speak. Notice the length of their sentences. Notice the structure. You'll probably find that the best communicators are not the ones using the biggest words. They're the ones who are clear. Try repeating what they say out loud. Get comfortable using those short forms. Make it a habit. If you're someone who tends to overthink your English, this method will help you relax. When you stop trying to be impressive and start focusing on being understood, you'll speak more naturally. You'll stop pausing every few words. You'll stop searching for perfect grammar in the middle of a sentence. You'll begin to speak in a way that feels more like you. This is also a great way to reduce fear of making mistakes. When your sentences are shorter, there's less room to get lost. You finish your thought, you move on, and if something doesn't come out right, it's okay. You can always try again, but the key is to keep things simple. Keep things direct. And remember that the goal is not to show how much English you know, but to share your ideas clearly and connect with others. Let me tell you about someone who might remind you of yourself or someone you know. Her name is Leah, and she's from Lyon, France. When I first spoke with her, she shared something I've heard many times before. She said, "I understand English pretty well. I've studied for years. I even watch movies in English, but when it's time to speak, I freeze." Leah was quiet, thoughtful, and incredibly motivated. But her biggest challenge wasn't grammar or vocabulary. It was fear. She was afraid of making mistakes, afraid of looking silly, afraid of not finding the right words. Leah had moved to Berlin to work in a design company. The working language there was English, and although her team was friendly, she found herself avoiding conversations. She would go into the office kitchen and hope no one else was there. She would skip lunch invitations and only speak when she had to. In meetings, she stayed quiet unless someone asked her a direct question. She later told me that her biggest fear wasn't speaking badly. It was freezing in the middle of a sentence and not knowing how to finish it. This is a common experience. Many people who learn English in school focus a lot on rules, structure, and tests. They know how to pass an exam, but real-life conversations feel unpredictable. That unpredictability makes them anxious. And anxiety often leads to silence. But silence doesn't build fluency. Leah knew she had to make a change. She just didn't know where to begin. Then something small happened that made a big difference. Leah lived with a roommate named Helena from Amsterdam. One morning, as they were both making coffee, Helena casually said, "Hey, what's your plan for today?" Leah hesitated. Her first reaction was to give a short answer and move on. But something told her to try just a little more. So she answered, "I have 2 meetings, one in the morning and one after lunch. I also need to finish a presentation." Helena smiled and replied, "Sounds busy. Is the presentation for your manager?" And just like that, a 2-minute conversation happened. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fast, but it was a start. From that day on, Leah made a simple decision. Every morning, during breakfast, she would try to start one small conversation in English with Helena. It didn't have to be deep or long. Sometimes it was just about the weather or what they were going to eat that day. Other times it was about their jobs or weekend plans or a movie they had seen. These tiny conversations became her safe space. There was no pressure, no judgment, just practice. And something amazing started to happen. Leah became more comfortable making small mistakes. She stopped correcting herself every 5 seconds. She began to notice patterns in how Helena spoke, how she used short sentences, how she used fillers like "I guess" or "kind of," how she paused naturally. Leah started to copy those patterns. She began to feel less like she was doing a language exercise and more like she was just talking. After a few weeks, she noticed a change at work. In meetings, she spoke up a little more. At lunch, she joined conversations instead of avoiding them. One day, during a client presentation, she gave a short summary of her team's progress, and she did it entirely in English without freezing. She told me afterward that her voice was shaking a little, but no one seemed to notice. In fact, her manager complimented her clarity. The real turning point came a few months later when she applied for a new job. It was a bigger role in a different company, and the interview was entirely in English. Before the call, she practiced her answers out loud, just like she had practiced her morning conversations with Helena. She kept her responses short, clear, and honest. She focused on connection, not perfection. And you know what? She got the job. What made the difference for Leah wasn't learning new vocabulary or studying complex grammar. It was building a habit. A habit of speaking a little bit every day, in a safe environment. A habit of choosing connection over fear. And once that habit was strong, her confidence started to grow naturally. There's something powerful about starting small. Many people think they need to wait until they feel confident to speak. But often, it works the other way around. You speak even when you're not confident. And with time, the confidence comes. Leah is proof of that. She started with just a few sentences over breakfast. Now she leads client calls, speaks up in meetings, and feels ready to take on new challenges, all in English. I want to emphasize something here. Leah didn't change who she was. She's still soft-spoken, still thoughtful. But now, she doesn't let fear make decisions for her. She found a way to practice consistently without pressure. And by doing that, she gave herself permission to improve, little by little. If you're listening and you've been holding yourself back from speaking, ask yourself this. What's one small conversation you can have today? Maybe with a colleague, a friend, or even a language partner online. Maybe you talk about what you had for dinner, or your weekend plans, or something simple about your day. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And when you do it again tomorrow, and the next day, something inside you begins to shift. You don't need to wait until you feel fluent to begin speaking. You become fluent by speaking. You become confident by trying. Even if your voice shakes a little. Even if you have to pause. Even if you need to ask, how do I say this? That's still progress. That's still communication. And that's how real English is learned. One of the most underrated tools for better communication in English is asking simple questions. Often, when people think about improving their speaking skills, they focus on giving better answers or speaking longer. But sometimes, the key to better conversations is not what you say, but what you ask. Simple questions are powerful. They keep the conversation alive, they show interest in the other person, and most importantly, they take the pressure off you to carry the entire dialogue. Think about it. When you're in a conversation and you're not sure what to say, it can feel stressful. You might feel like you need to have a perfect response, or you start worrying about vocabulary or grammar. But if you shift your focus from performing to being curious, everything becomes easier. Instead of feeling like you're being tested, you're just showing interest. That's much more natural. And that's where simple questions come in. Let's look at a few examples. Imagine you're at work, and a colleague mentions a new project. You don't need to prepare a long opinion or give detailed feedback. You can just ask, what's your role in the project? Or, is the deadline soon? These kinds of questions are short, clear, and easy to ask, but they open the door for conversation. They give the other person a chance to share more, and they help you stay involved without feeling overwhelmed. Now let's take another situation. You're traveling and you're at a hotel or at a cafe in a new city. You don't need perfect English to connect with someone. Questions like, is this your favorite place around here? Or, what do you recommend from the menu? Can start a friendly exchange. Even if the person gives a long answer, you only need to listen and ask a follow-up like, why do you like it? Or, have you lived here long? See how that works? The pressure moves away from your own speaking, and instead, you become the person who is leading the conversation, just by being curious. And how about friendships? Let's say you meet someone new at a language exchange or social event. Instead of feeling nervous about talking about yourself, you could start with something like, how did you start learning English? Or, what do you do when you're not working? These are simple, personal questions that invite people to talk about their experiences. They help build connection without needing complex vocabulary or long speeches. Asking questions also shows that you care. When people feel listened to, they feel more comfortable around you. They don't expect you to be perfect in English. They appreciate your interest. And that's what real communication is about: connection, not perfection. Let me give you a real example. A learner from Warsaw told me that when she first started speaking English at her job, she would freeze during team meetings. She was afraid of saying something wrong. Then one day, instead of trying to make a full comment or share an idea, she simply asked, "Can you repeat that part about the deadline?" It was a small question, but her colleague answered and then asked her what she thought. That moment gave her confidence. From then on, she made it a habit to ask one question in every meeting. Over time, those questions led to more dialogue, and eventually, she started sharing her ideas too. But it all began with a small question. The great thing about questions is that you can prepare them in advance. Think about situations where you speak English, maybe during work, at school, while traveling, or online. Take a moment and write down 3 or 4 questions that feel natural to you. They don't need to be clever or deep. They just need to be real. For example, at work, what are the next steps for this task? When do you need this by? Can you help me understand this part? With friends, what did you do over the weekend? Do you like living in this city? What kind of music do you listen to? While traveling, is this your favorite place to eat? What's the best thing to do around here? How long have you been working here? Even online, during a language exchange or virtual meeting, you can ask, what made you start learning English? How do you usually practice? Do you enjoy speaking or listening more? These questions are short. They're not perfect, but they're enough. And in real life, enough is all you need to connect. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you start asking questions instead of always explaining. You stop feeling like you need to perform, and instead, you start participating. You become part of the conversation. People often worry about how they sound in English. But here's a little secret. People don't remember your grammar mistakes. They remember how you made them feel. When you ask them about their story, their ideas, their preferences, you make them feel valued. That's something they don't forget. I want you to try this in your next English conversation. Instead of preparing a big answer, prepare a small question. Ask something simple. Then, listen. And if you're not sure what to say next, ask another question. It's like building a bridge one step at a time. You don't have to go fast, you just have to keep walking. So many learners tell me they feel stuck when speaking because they run out of words. But often, what they really need is not more words. They need better habits. Asking questions is one of those habits. It gives you structure, it gives you confidence, and it helps the conversation flow naturally. So next time you're in a conversation, try asking instead of explaining. You'll be surprised at how much easier it feels and how much more confident you become just by being curious. Let me tell you a story that I think many of you will relate to. It's about Daniel, a software engineer from Berlin. Daniel loved studying English. He had been doing it for years. He read English books, watched English movies, even used English subtitles to help improve his vocabulary. He used language apps daily, and he knew a lot of words. He even followed grammar explanations online and felt proud when he could understand complex structures. But even with all this study, Daniel had a problem. He rarely spoke English. And when he did, he felt awkward and slow. He worked for a large international company, and his team included people from different countries: Italy, Sweden, Brazil, South Korea. They all communicated in English. And yet, Daniel usually stayed quiet during meetings, especially informal ones. He only spoke when he absolutely had to, and he always felt nervous. It wasn't because he didn't know what to say. He just didn't feel confident saying it out loud. The fear of making mistakes or sounding less fluent than his colleagues kept him silent. For a long time, Daniel thought he needed more study before he could speak well. He told himself, if I just finish this next course, or once I memorize this list of phrases, then I'll be ready. But the truth was, no amount of silent study was preparing him to speak with real people. He could write great emails in English. He could understand what others said. But when it was his turn to speak, he froze. Something was missing. One day, during a company team-building event, something changed. They were having coffee before a workshop, and Daniel found himself standing next to Sophia, a colleague from Lisbon. They had never really talked before. Normally, he would have just smiled politely and waited for the meeting to begin. But that day, he decided to challenge himself. He remembered something he had read, that asking simple questions is one of the best ways to start speaking. So, he asked her, "Do you like working on the new project?" It was a short, basic question, but it opened the door. Sophia smiled and answered enthusiastically. She shared what she liked about the project, what she found challenging, and asked Daniel what he thought. He answered slowly, carefully, but something felt different. The pressure was lower. He wasn't trying to give a perfect speech. He was just having a real conversation. It didn't feel like a test. It felt like connecting. That experience stayed with him. Daniel realized he didn't need to wait until he felt fluent to start talking. What he needed was to build small habits. So, he made a personal rule. Every day at work, he would ask one question in English to a colleague. It could be about anything. Work, weekend plans, food, travel, hobbies. He kept it simple. Did you enjoy your weekend? What's your favorite part of this city? Have you worked on a similar project before? Each question led to a short conversation, and each time he felt a little more confident. At first, he still made mistakes. Sometimes he forgot words, or he paused too long. But his colleagues didn't mind. They appreciated his effort, and the more he spoke, the more natural it became. Within a few months, Daniel was having longer conversations. He no longer hesitated to speak up during team meetings. He started sharing his ideas more openly, and people began to see him not only as a great engineer, but as a great communicator. But the most important change wasn't about his vocabulary or grammar. It was how he saw himself. Daniel stopped thinking of himself as someone who was bad at speaking. He started seeing himself as a person who could connect with others through English. And that shift made all the difference. He told me something I'll never forget. He said, "The turning point wasn't when I learned a new phrase. It was when I asked a simple question and saw someone respond. That made me feel like I could be part of the conversation." That's the real goal, isn't it? To feel like you belong in the conversation. To feel like you can connect, share, and respond, even if your English isn't perfect. Daniel still studies. He still reads and watches videos in English. But now he also practices speaking in small, real moments throughout his day. And those moments are where his true progress happens. His story reminds us that it's easy to hide behind study. It feels safe. No one hears you make mistakes when you're reading alone. But growth doesn't happen in comfort. Growth happens in action. And sometimes, the smallest action, like asking a simple question, can lead to the biggest change. So if you're listening to this and thinking, "That sounds like me," remember Daniel's story. He didn't wait until he felt ready. He made a small, clear plan, and he followed through. One question a day. That's all it took to change how he used English in his real life. If you want to get better at speaking English, there's something I really want you to understand. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be consistent. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is waiting for the perfect moment to practice. They think they need a language partner, a quiet space, or a specific app to help them. But the truth is, if you want to improve your communication skills, you have to start using English in your real life, every single day. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but I don't have time. Or maybe, I don't know what to practice. That's okay. I'm not talking about studying for hours. I'm not even asking you to do difficult exercises. I'm talking about using the English you already know to describe your world, your routine, and your thoughts, even in small moments. These small moments are powerful because they happen every day. And when you practice something daily, it becomes part of you. Let's start with one of the easiest and most useful habits, describing your daily routine in English. This might sound simple, but it's an incredible tool to build fluency. Think about your morning. What do you do when you wake up? What do you eat for breakfast? How do you get to work or school? All of these things can be turned into short English sentences. For example, when you're eating breakfast, say to yourself, "I'm having toast with butter and coffee," or "I made eggs today. I cooked them with tomatoes." Say it out loud if you can. If not, say it in your mind. The goal is to get used to building sentences about your own life. You can do the same thing when you're walking to the bus stop. You can say, "The weather is cold today," or "I see a lot of traffic." These are everyday thoughts, but in English, they become real practice. And the best part? You don't need anyone else around. You don't need a teacher. You don't even need to stop what you're doing. You're just using English to describe your world moment by moment. Another simple way to practice is by listening to podcasts. You're already doing that right now. But here's a way to take it a step further. After you finish listening, try to repeat something you heard. It could be a full sentence or even just a phrase. For example, if I say, "It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be real," you can repeat it out loud or quietly to yourself. When you repeat real sentences, you train your brain and your mouth to work together in English. And over time, this makes your speaking feel more natural. You can also write. Yes, writing is not the same as speaking, but it helps build the same skills. Try writing short dialogues. Imagine a conversation between you and a friend. Keep it simple. One sentence from you, one sentence from the friend. Like, "Hey, do you want to get coffee later?" And "Sure, what time?" This helps you practice everyday expressions in a way that feels useful and realistic. You can even write about your day in journal form. Just a few lines. For example, "Today I woke up at 7. I went to the gym. I worked from home. For dinner, I had pasta." These simple sentences are your building blocks. You don't need to write essays. You just need to keep the habit going. Here's a fun activity I often suggest. Choose one object in your room and describe it in English. Let's say you pick your phone. You can say, "My phone is black. It's next to my laptop. I use it to check messages and listen to music." Or maybe your coffee mug. "This is my favorite mug. It's blue and white. I use it every morning." This is real English. You're connecting language with your own environment, and that makes the learning stick. One of my favorite tips is to narrate what you're doing, like you're explaining it to someone who doesn't see you. For example, "I'm opening the fridge. I'm looking for some fruit. I found an apple." You're talking to yourself, yes, but you're doing it in English, and that's what matters. You're teaching your brain that English isn't something you turn on only in class. It's part of your life. When you turn these small tasks into practice, something magical happens. You stop thinking of English as a subject. You start seeing it as a tool. You stop feeling like a student, and you start feeling like a communicator. This is the shift that builds confidence and fluency. Let me share a quick example. One of our listeners, Sarah from Milan, told me she started describing her meals in English every day. At first, she only said one sentence at breakfast. "I'm eating cereal." Then she added more. "I made coffee, I added sugar. It tastes good." After 2 weeks, she noticed something amazing. When she spoke to her English tutor, she found the words came more easily. Why? Because she had been practicing those words all week. No pressure, no stress, just small daily habits. So what can you do today? Pick one daily activity, eating, walking, brushing your teeth, and start describing it in English. 1 or 2 sentences is enough. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, pause after a few minutes and repeat something you heard. If you like writing, try writing a short dialogue or journal entry tonight before bed. These small things, done every day, will change how you speak. You won't see it in one day, but in 1 week, in 1 month, you will feel the difference. Let me tell you a story that I think might inspire you. It's about a listener named Irina. She's from Bucharest, Romania, and when she first started learning English, she felt like many people do. Stuck. She had studied grammar. She had memorized vocabulary lists. She even watched English shows with subtitles. But when it came to speaking, she froze. The words were there, but they didn't come out easily. Every time she tried to speak with someone, she hesitated, translating each sentence in her head, unsure if it was correct. Irina worked at a local design studio, and some of her clients were international. She wasn't required to speak English fluently, but she really wanted to. She had dreams of working abroad someday or at least traveling more confidently. She didn't want to feel limited by language. But the problem wasn't her knowledge. It was that speaking felt unnatural. She told me that when she opened her mouth to talk, her thoughts became slow, like they had to pass through a long tunnel before turning into words. One day, after a long day of work, she went for a walk in a nearby park. It was something she often did to clear her mind. As she walked, she looked around, and almost without thinking, she said aloud in English, "There are a lot of people here today." It surprised her. She had never spoken English out loud while alone before, but it felt safe. No pressure. Just her, the trees, the sky, and her voice. That night, she thought about it. Maybe this could be her way of practicing. No audience, no judgment. Just a way to turn her thoughts into words in real time. So the next day, she tried it again. As she walked, she started describing what she saw. I see a man walking his dog. The flowers are yellow and orange. The air is a little cold today. Simple sentences, but real ones. She spoke about what was in front of her. And slowly, something began to shift. At first, she only managed a few sentences during her walks. She would run out of things to say or worry about how she sounded. But she kept going. She made it a routine. 20 minutes each day, walking and speaking. She didn't need a partner. She didn't need a textbook. Just her phone in her pocket, a path to follow, and her voice. Sometimes she would pretend she was talking to a friend, telling them about her day. Other times, she would imagine giving directions or explaining something simple like what she planned to cook for dinner. Over time, Irina noticed that she was getting faster, not just in speaking, but in thinking. Words that used to take time to come to her now appeared more quickly. She didn't have to pause and translate as much. The connection between her thoughts and her English words became smoother. It wasn't about being perfect. She still made mistakes. But she felt more free. And that freedom was everything. She also noticed changes at work. When she needed to write emails in English, she found the words more easily. When she had short conversations with clients, she didn't panic like before. One day, her manager asked her to help with a short video presentation for an English-speaking partner. A year ago, Irina would have said no immediately. But this time, she said yes. She wrote her part, practiced a few times, and recorded it confidently. It wasn't flawless, but it was clear, and the client responded warmly. What made Irina's progress so powerful was that she used real language in real time. She wasn't memorizing lines or repeating after someone. She was thinking and speaking at the same time, using the English that was already inside her. And because she was doing it during an activity she enjoyed, walking, she looked forward to it. It became part of her lifestyle, not just part of her study routine. She told me something that I'll never forget. She said, "I stopped trying to sound smart. I just started trying to sound real." That's the key. When you stop trying to impress and just focus on expressing, everything changes. You speak more. You enjoy it more. You improve faster. Irina's method might seem simple, but it's incredibly effective. Speaking out loud while walking helped her break the habit of overthinking. It gave her space to explore the language without fear. And because she did it consistently, day after day, her fluency began to grow naturally. Her voice became stronger, her sentences more fluid, and her confidence more solid. This kind of practice is available to everyone. You don't need special tools. You don't need a perfect plan. Just a little time and the willingness to talk to yourself out loud. Describe what you see. Talk about what you're doing. Pretend you're telling a friend about your day. Let your thoughts move in English. The more you do it, the more automatic it becomes. Irina's story reminds us that fluency doesn't begin in a classroom. It begins in moments, in walks, in routines, in your own voice. And most of all, it begins when you stop waiting for the right words and start using the words you already know. That's how real communication starts to grow. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Fluency isn't about speaking perfectly. It's not about using the right grammar in every sentence or impressing people with complicated words. In fact, the truth is that fluency comes more from habit than from knowledge of rules. What I mean by that is that the rhythm of your speech is much more important than whether you've used the perfect grammar in each sentence. In fact, sometimes it's not about speaking fast at all. It's about speaking clearly, and that takes time. I know many of you feel the pressure to speak quickly, especially when you hear other people talking fluently. You might start thinking, I need to speak faster. I need to use advanced words. I need to sound like a native speaker. But let me tell you this. It's okay to slow down. In fact, it's often better if you do. Let's talk about rhythm for a second. When you're speaking, it's not just the words that matter. It's how you say them. Speaking too quickly, trying to fit in too many words, only makes you harder to understand, even if you're using perfect grammar. What you really need is to find your rhythm. Take your time. Breathe. Think about what you want to say. You'll find that speaking slowly and deliberately will make your English sound much more natural. The key to fluency is to speak with confidence, and that comes with practice. Fluency is a result of speaking often, not necessarily speaking perfectly. You see, when you get into a rhythm with English, it doesn't matter if every single sentence is grammatically perfect. It's much more important that you can communicate your ideas clearly. The right word doesn't always need to be the perfect word. What matters is getting your message across. Think about it like this. When you speak, you don't need to have every single detail perfect. What you need is to be understood. You need to use language that is clear and easy for others to follow. And that doesn't mean rushing through your sentences, trying to get everything in one breath. Instead, pause when you need to. Take a moment to think, and then speak slowly. Not too slowly, of course, but just slow enough that you don't feel pressured. Let me give you an example of how rhythm works in practice. Imagine you're in a conversation with a friend, and you want to say, "I went to the store this morning to buy some bread and milk." Now, if you say that really fast with no pause, it might sound like this. "I went to the store morning to buy some bread and milk." Can you even hear all the words? It's just a blur, right? But if you say the same sentence, but at a slower, more natural pace, it sounds much better. "I went to the store this morning to buy some bread and milk." Do you see the difference? By pausing at the right moments, you give the listener time to understand. You also give yourself time to breathe, think, and stay in control of your words. This kind of rhythm doesn't just help with understanding. It helps you feel less stressed, too. A lot of people don't realize this, but pauses are just as important as the words themselves. Pausing at the right time helps your listener process your words and gives them a moment to think about what you've said. It's not about rushing from one word to the next. It's about making sure your message is clear and that the person you're talking to can follow your thoughts. Think about how you would talk in your own language. Would you rush through everything? Probably not. You pause when you need to. You give your words space to breathe. That's exactly what you should be doing in English as well. Let's break it down even more. When you feel nervous about speaking, you might try to rush, right? You might start talking faster because you're worried about making a mistake. But that's not helping you. In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's making you sound more nervous and harder to understand. Instead, the next time you speak in English, remember, breathe, pause, think, then speak slowly and clearly. Here's a tip for you. If you find yourself speaking too quickly or getting stuck, try counting to 3 in your head before continuing. It sounds simple, but it works. When you say something like, "I went to the store," count silently to yourself. 1, 2, 3. This pause gives you a moment to gather your thoughts, and it allows the other person to keep up with you. You might also notice that when you're speaking slowly, your words seem more deliberate. This gives you time to focus on choosing the right words, not worrying about whether they're perfect. Perfection is not the goal. Communication is. Let's take this into a real-world example. Imagine you're at work and you need to explain a project to your boss. You might feel nervous, and the temptation is to speak quickly to get everything out before you lose your confidence. But this could cause confusion. Instead, take a deep breath. Speak slowly. Say something like, "The project is going well. We're on track. We just need a few more days for testing." Notice how I'm using pauses here. I'm not rushing. I'm giving you a chance to absorb each part of the message. This method doesn't just make you sound more confident, it also makes your message more effective. And here's another thing. Sometimes when people focus too much on grammar, they forget to focus on meaning. But in a real conversation, it's not about perfect grammar, it's about understanding. If you say, "I have gone to the store this morning," it's grammatically correct, but the meaning is the same as saying, "I went to the store this morning." The second sentence is more natural and doesn't require you to force an extra structure into your speech. Remember, simple sentences with good rhythm are often more effective than complicated ones. So, the next time you're practicing English, focus on rhythm, breathe, take your time, speak slowly, don't try to rush. You'll find that when you give your words room to breathe, they'll start to flow more easily, and you'll be able to express yourself with confidence. Try this out today. As you go about your day, practice speaking slowly and clearly. No need to rush, just take your time and notice how it feels. And remember, fluency isn't about the rules. It's about finding your rhythm and staying consistent. Let me share with you the story of Tomas, who is from Lisbon. Tomas had always been passionate about learning English. He had studied hard, expanded his vocabulary, and spent hours practicing grammar. But there was one thing that always seemed to hold him back. You see, Tomas had developed this habit of speaking incredibly fast. His goal was to sound fluent, to speak as quickly and confidently as the native speakers he admired. He believed that speaking fast would make him sound more like them. However, in reality, this approach caused more problems than it solved. Tomas didn't realize it at first, but speaking so quickly made it difficult for others to understand him. His sentences would blur together, and sometimes he would mix up words or forget to add important details. Instead of sounding fluent, he often came across as unclear. His friends and colleagues, especially those who were not fluent in English themselves, would frequently ask him to repeat what he had said. This constant need to repeat himself made Tomas frustrated and self-conscious. The more he tried to rush through his sentences, the more mistakes he made and the less confident he felt. One day, while discussing his struggles with a colleague at work, Tomas realized something important. His colleague, who was a native English speaker, explained that fluency isn't about speaking as fast as possible. Instead, it's about speaking in a way that is clear and easy to follow. Tomas started to reflect on his own communication style. He understood that he wasn't allowing his listeners to fully process what he was saying, and that his goal should be to ensure clarity, not speed. That's when Tomas decided to change his approach. He stopped trying to rush through conversations and started focusing on speaking at a more manageable pace. Instead of saying everything in one breath, he began to take his time with each sentence, allowing himself to pause between thoughts. He wasn't trying to sound perfect, he was just trying to be understood. At first, this change felt unnatural. Tomas was used to speaking quickly, and it felt awkward to slow down. But with practice, he began to feel more comfortable. The results were incredible. As Tomas started speaking more slowly and clearly, his communication improved. People began to understand him better, and they didn't need him to repeat himself as often. His confidence grew, not because he was speaking faster, but because he knew that he was making himself understood. Tomas realized that he didn't have to choose between speaking quickly and sounding fluent. Instead, he could focus on clarity, and that alone would help him communicate more effectively. One of the biggest benefits of slowing down was that it gave Tomas more time to think. When he spoke too quickly, he often stumbled over his words or got lost in his thoughts. But by speaking at a more controlled pace, he found that his ideas came out more smoothly. He had time to organize his thoughts, and this made him feel more confident in his ability to communicate. He didn't have to rush to the finish line. He could take his time and still convey his message clearly. Tomas also realized that slowing down didn't mean speaking slowly all the time. It was about finding the right balance. In casual conversations, he could still speak at a normal pace. But in more formal situations, such as meetings or presentations, he made sure to slow down and articulate his words clearly. This balance allowed him to be more flexible in different contexts, while still maintaining effective communication. Another key lesson Tomas learned was that fluency isn't just about the speed at which you speak. It's about how well you can express your thoughts and connect with others. Before, Tomas had thought that fluency meant speaking without hesitation, without pauses. But now, he understood that fluency was about being able to communicate your ideas in a way that others could understand, regardless of how fast or slow you spoke. One of the things that really helped Tomas was practicing with real-life conversations. He started engaging more with his colleagues and friends in English, and he made a conscious effort to speak more slowly and clearly. At first, it felt a bit strange, but over time, he became more comfortable. He also started recording himself speaking and listening back to his recordings. This gave him the opportunity to hear how he sounded and identify areas where he could improve. Listening to himself helped him become more aware of his speaking pace, and he was able to adjust accordingly. Tomas also learned that speaking slowly doesn't mean you have to sacrifice spontaneity. You don't need to overthink every word before you speak. Instead, focus on delivering your message with clarity, and the flow will come naturally. Tomas found that by practicing this approach, he didn't lose his ability to be spontaneous or express his thoughts in the moment. In fact, he was able to speak more confidently and with greater ease. As time passed, Tomas found that this new approach to speaking had a positive impact on other areas of his life as well. He became more comfortable speaking English in social situations, and he even started volunteering to present in meetings at work. People began to notice the difference in his communication style. They appreciated that he spoke clearly, and they found it easier to follow his ideas. Tomas no longer felt the need to rush through conversations to prove his fluency. Instead, he was able to engage in meaningful discussions and express himself more confidently. Looking back, Tomas was grateful for the change he had made in his approach to speaking. He had learned that fluency wasn't about trying to sound like a native speaker or speaking as quickly as possible. It was about speaking in a way that was clear and understandable. By slowing down and focusing on clarity, Tomas had not only improved his communication skills, but also built his confidence in speaking English. And this, I believe, is a lesson that can help all of us. Fluency doesn't come from speaking fast or using fancy words. It comes from speaking with confidence, clarity, and intention. So the next time you find yourself rushing through a conversation in English, remember Tomas's story. Take a breath, slow down, and focus on communicating clearly. You'll be amazed at how much more effective your conversations will become. When we start learning English, one of the biggest challenges is trying to translate everything directly from our native language into English. It's a common mistake we all make, especially when we want to speak quickly and confidently. But what many people don't realize is that translating word for word often leads to awkward or unnatural sentences. English has its own way of expressing ideas, and it doesn't always follow the same patterns as other languages. That's why today I want to talk about the power of using simple, everyday expressions in English. These are phrases that native speakers use all the time, often without thinking about it, and they can help you sound more natural in your conversations. The best part? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Instead of getting stuck on translating every single word, focus on learning common expressions and phrases that people use in real-life situations. One of the easiest ways to improve your fluency and sound more natural is by using these expressions. Let's take a simple phrase like, "How can I help you?" This is something you might hear every day, whether you're at a store, at work, or even just talking to a friend. It's a polite and straightforward way to offer assistance. Instead of trying to figure out the translation for every word or creating a sentence from scratch, you can just remember this entire phrase and use it when needed. This way, you don't have to think too much about what to say in the moment, and you'll sound more confident. Another great example is the phrase, "Let me think about it." This is something you hear often when someone is considering something or making a decision. It's a simple and clear way to give yourself a moment to think before responding. In fact, this is an expression I use often in conversations. Instead of trying to rush to an answer, I'll say, "Let me think about it," giving myself a second to organize my thoughts. This expression is helpful in many situations, especially when you don't want to rush a decision or need more time to reflect. But why do I recommend using these simple expressions rather than translating from your own language? Well, the reason is that phrases like, "How can I help you?" and "Let me think about it" are familiar to native speakers. They are part of the everyday language they use. So when you incorporate them into your own speech, you'll sound more like a native speaker too. You're not just learning words. You're learning the rhythm and flow of natural conversation. In fact, one of the best things you can do to improve your English fluency is to create a small list of useful expressions. These should be phrases that you can use in your daily life. Expressions that are simple, practical, and easy to remember. Once you have your list, try to repeat them every day. Don't worry about using complex vocabulary or perfect grammar. Just focus on sounding natural and confident. For example, you might want to add phrases like, "What do you think?" or "That sounds great" to your list. These are expressions that are commonly used in conversations to ask for opinions or to show agreement. Instead of pausing and searching for the right words in the moment, you can simply rely on these ready-made phrases. And over time, they'll become second nature to you. Another good idea is to create expressions that are specific to your everyday life. If you work in an office, for example, you could add phrases like, "I'll get back to you on that," or "Let's schedule a meeting." If you travel a lot, you might include expressions like, "Where's the nearest bus stop?" or "How long does it take to get there?" These are the kinds of phrases you'll need often, so learning them will make you more confident when using English in different situations. What's really powerful about this approach is that it helps you build your confidence. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the idea of speaking English perfectly, you'll have a set of phrases that you know well and can rely on. This will reduce the pressure of trying to come up with something new every time you speak. Instead, you can focus on having a smooth conversation without worrying about making mistakes or struggling to find the right words. Let's talk about how you can actually create your list of useful expressions. Think about the situations where you use English the most. Do you have conversations with colleagues at work? Maybe you need to answer customer questions, or you often discuss projects. If that's the case, write down phrases that you use in these contexts. For example, "Can I help you with that?" or "Let me know if you have any questions." These phrases will help you sound more professional and confident at work. If you're a student, you might want to focus on phrases for the classroom. "Can I ask a question?" or "I don't understand, can you explain that again?" These phrases are simple but essential for communication in an academic environment. When you use them, it's easier to participate in class discussions and ask for clarification when you need it. You can also think about phrases you might use with friends or in social situations. For instance, "Let's grab a coffee sometime" or "What's up?" are casual and friendly ways to interact with people. These expressions make conversations feel more relaxed and natural. Again, the goal is not to memorize complicated sentences, but to focus on phrases that fit into your daily life. Once you've created your list, practice these expressions every day. You don't need to practice for hours. Even a few minutes each day can make a big difference. You can repeat the phrases out loud or use them in sentences. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become using them in real conversations. Over time, these expressions will become part of your vocabulary, and you won't have to think twice when you use them. You can even take this a step further by using these expressions in different situations. For example, if you're learning to ask for directions, try using the phrase, "How do I get to place?" in a variety of contexts. If you're practicing at a cafe, ask questions like, "What's the special today?" or "Can I have the bill, please?" The more you practice in different scenarios, the more confident you'll be when these situations arise in real life. The beauty of this approach is that it simplifies your communication. Instead of worrying about grammar rules or complicated vocabulary, you can focus on using phrases that are practical and effective. As a result, you'll sound more fluent and be able to communicate more easily in English. So remember, instead of trying to translate everything, focus on learning simple expressions that you can use in everyday conversations. Create your list, practice daily, and soon you'll find that your fluency improves naturally. Sophia lived in Prague and had always been passionate about learning English. She started by watching her favorite TV series, immersing herself in the dialogues and trying to pick up new words. It was an enjoyable experience because she could combine learning with entertainment. She would sit in front of the screen, listening intently to how the characters spoke, how they phrased their sentences, and the vocabulary they used. At first, it was all just about listening and understanding. She was picking up words and phrases but struggled to say them herself. What Sophia didn't realize was that just listening to English wasn't enough. Even though she could understand everything on the screen, she found it difficult to speak the same way in real life. She would watch a scene where two characters had a conversation, and she would be able to recognize the words and even translate them into Czech. But when it came time to speak, it was a different story. Her pronunciation was off, her fluency was lacking, and most importantly, she felt like she wasn't using the language naturally. One day, after a particularly frustrating attempt at speaking with a colleague at work, Sophia realized that there had to be more to learning English than just watching TV shows. She realized that she needed to go a step further and start practicing the phrases and expressions she was hearing. The key was to make her speech more fluid and natural, just like the characters in the shows she enjoyed. That's when she started a new habit, repeating the lines she heard in the series out loud. She didn't just listen to the dialogue anymore. She started mimicking the characters. At first, it felt a bit awkward. She was speaking out loud when no one else was around, just practicing the same sentences repeatedly. She would pause the show, repeat a line, and then play it again to check if she sounded similar to what the character said. Over time, Sophia found herself getting more comfortable. The phrases that once sounded difficult to pronounce started coming more easily. The beauty of this approach was that it didn't require her to sit down and study grammar rules or vocabulary lists. Instead, she was learning in a way that felt natural and fun. She was picking up common expressions, the rhythm of speech, and the intonation used by native speakers. For example, she learned how to say things like, "What's going on?" or "I'll be right back," with the correct stress and tone, making her sound more confident in her speech. Sophia's focus shifted from just understanding English to actually speaking it. She realized that the key to sounding natural wasn't to memorize complicated grammar rules, but to make the language a part of her everyday life. So, instead of just focusing on new vocabulary or perfect grammar, she began to pay attention to how native speakers use the language in different contexts. She began mimicking their tone, pauses, and rhythm. The next step for Sophia was incorporating these expressions into her daily conversations. She started with small, easy phrases that she had practiced, such as "How's it going?" or "I'll get back to you on that." She used them when talking to her friends, colleagues, or even when interacting with shopkeepers. The more she used these simple expressions, the more confident she became. They were easy to remember and apply, and she didn't have to worry about making mistakes because they felt natural to her. But the real breakthrough came when Sophia started practicing in front of a mirror. This might sound a bit silly, but it was a game changer. Speaking in front of a mirror helped her see how her mouth moved and allowed her to hear herself more clearly. She could practice the same phrases over and over, fine-tuning her pronunciation and making sure she was comfortable with her delivery. It also gave her a chance to see how she looked when speaking, which helped build her confidence. It wasn't just about repeating words. It was about becoming comfortable with the sound of her own voice in English. After a while, Sophia started noticing changes in her interactions. Her colleagues at work, who had once struggled to understand her English, now commented on how much more fluent she sounded. She was no longer hesitating or searching for words. She had a set of simple, effective expressions that she could rely on, and they came to her naturally. Whether she was giving a presentation, talking to a customer, or chatting with a friend, she felt at ease. The repetition had paid off, and her English was more confident and fluid than ever before. Sophia's story is a great example of how consistency and practice can make a huge difference in language learning. She didn't wait for perfection before she spoke. She started using simple expressions, even when she wasn't sure if she was getting everything right. She trusted the process and kept repeating the phrases until they felt natural. The key here is that she didn't let fear or insecurity hold her back. She made speaking English a regular part of her life, and as a result, her skills improved significantly. One of the most important lessons we can take from Sophia's experience is the value of repetition. Sometimes we think we need to learn new things all the time or focus on more complex aspects of the language. But in reality, repeating simple expressions and focusing on fluency can have a far greater impact. It's not about memorizing endless vocabulary lists or stressing over every grammatical detail. It's about feeling comfortable with the language, understanding how it's used in real-world conversations, and gradually building your confidence. Sophia's success was a result of her commitment to daily practice. She made English a part of her routine, whether she was walking to work, cooking dinner, or just watching TV. Every moment became an opportunity to practice, and over time, those small efforts added up. If you're struggling to speak more confidently, I encourage you to follow Sophia's example. Start by repeating simple phrases, mimic how native speakers talk, and practice speaking every day. You might be surprised at how quickly your fluency improves. Listening carefully is one of the most important skills you can develop in any language, but especially in English. Often, when we focus too much on what we want to say next, we miss the opportunity to truly understand the other person. This can lead to misunderstandings and awkward conversations. When we listen attentively, not only do we better understand the message, but we also have the chance to craft a more thoughtful and relevant response. Imagine you're having a conversation with someone, whether it's at work, in a social setting, or even just with a friend. If you're only thinking about your next words while they're speaking, you're not fully engaging with them. You're not giving them the space to express themselves fully, and you're not allowing yourself to absorb the information they're providing. When you don't listen closely, you risk responding to the wrong thing or not addressing the real point of their message. One of the most effective ways to improve your communication skills is to practice listening with full attention. It's not just about hearing the words, it's about understanding the meaning behind them. Often people say more than they think they are. The tone of voice, the pace of speech, and the body language all convey messages that go beyond the words themselves. When you listen carefully, you're able to pick up on these subtleties, which allows you to respond more appropriately and effectively. Think about it this way. When you listen with focus, you're not just waiting for your turn to talk. You're engaging with the speaker, processing what they're saying, and considering your response carefully. This leads to more meaningful conversations because you're truly involved in the exchange of ideas, not just waiting for the opportunity to share your own. One common challenge for language learners, especially in English, is that we often try to respond too quickly. We feel pressure to speak as soon as there's a pause, and that pressure sometimes makes us miss important details of what the other person is saying. This happens because we're often thinking about grammar, vocabulary, or how to phrase our sentences correctly instead of focusing on understanding the message. But when we shift our focus to listening first and speaking second, we give ourselves the chance to fully process what's being said and respond in a way that's clear and thoughtful. Take a moment to think about how you listen when you're in a conversation. Are you truly paying attention? Or are you just waiting for your chance to speak? Are you hearing the words? Or are you also picking up on the context and emotions behind them? Being able to answer these questions honestly will give you a clear picture of how much room there is to improve your listening skills. Let's look at an example. Imagine you're in a meeting at work, and your colleague is explaining a new project. They're speaking English, and while you understand most of what they're saying, you're thinking ahead about your next point. As a result, you don't fully listen to the details of their explanation. You catch the general idea but miss a few important specifics. When it's your turn to speak, you might end up addressing a point that wasn't even discussed, and that could confuse the entire conversation. Instead, if you had listened closely, you would have understood the full scope of the project and responded in a more meaningful way. Now, imagine a different scenario. You're in the same meeting, but this time you focus completely on what your colleague is saying. You don't think about your next sentence while they talk. Instead, you give them your full attention, processing everything they say. When it's your turn to speak, you find that you have a much clearer understanding of the project and can ask more relevant questions or give better suggestions. You've not only improved your response, but you've also contributed to the conversation in a way that adds value. Another important aspect of listening is the ability to understand nonverbal cues. These can be especially important when communicating in a second language like English. Often, people's tone of voice, gestures, and facial expressions tell you just as much, if not more, than their words. When you listen carefully to both what is being said and how it is being said, you pick up on these additional clues, making it easier to respond in the most appropriate way. So, how can you improve your listening skills in English? One of the most important steps is to practice active listening. This means that when someone is speaking, you focus entirely on them. You don't interrupt, you don't think about your next sentence, and you don't get distracted by your phone or other things around you. Active listening involves giving the speaker your full attention and letting them finish their thoughts before you respond. When you do speak, it's with a response that shows you've understood what they've said. A great way to practice active listening is through simple exercises in daily life. For instance, try listening to an English podcast or an audiobook. As you listen, take a moment to pause and summarize what you've just heard. This could be in your own words or even by jotting down a few notes. Doing this helps you focus on the main ideas and key details in what you've just listened to. Afterward, think about how you would respond if you were part of the conversation. How would you add your thoughts to the discussion based on what you just heard? Another useful exercise is to listen to someone speaking in English and then ask them questions based on what they've said. This shows that you're engaged and helps you clarify any points you might not have fully understood. The more you practice this, the better you'll become at listening and responding in a way that's relevant and insightful. One practical tip to improve your listening is to take a moment to breathe before you speak. We often feel a rush to answer immediately, but giving yourself a few seconds to process what's been said can make a big difference. By taking a breath, you allow yourself the time to understand the conversation fully and respond with greater clarity. This pause helps you avoid impulsive responses and ensures that what you say makes sense in the context of the conversation. Listening is not just about hearing the words. It's about engaging with the person and fully understanding their message. The more you practice listening attentively, the more natural and effective your communication will become. This will not only improve your spoken English, but also your overall ability to connect with others. By focusing on listening, you create stronger and more meaningful exchanges, helping you build better relationships, whether at work, with friends, or even in casual conversations. Amir was a young professional living in Amsterdam, working in a fast-paced international environment. He had learned English in school, and over the years he had gathered a wide vocabulary. He could understand nearly everything that was said to him, and his grammar was fairly solid. But despite all of this, Amir struggled in conversations. Whenever he was in a meeting or talking with colleagues, he felt an overwhelming pressure to speak as much as possible, as quickly as possible. He thought that speaking more would make him sound fluent and capable. At first, Amir's strategy worked. He was able to contribute to discussions and share his ideas, but over time, he noticed that the more he talked, the more misunderstandings and awkward silences occurred. His colleagues, many of whom were also non-native English speakers, often looked confused or unsure of what he was trying to communicate. Amir would then rush to clarify, but the clarity he was aiming for was often lost in the rush of words. Amir's breakthrough came one afternoon during a meeting where he was supposed to present an idea for a new project. As usual, he had prepared thoroughly and planned to speak for several minutes, explaining every detail in hopes that his colleagues would be impressed with his knowledge. But when it was his turn to speak, something unexpected happened. As Amir began explaining his idea, he could see the room's energy shift. Some colleagues were taking notes while others seemed distracted, and a few were even nodding off. Amir could feel the tension growing in the room, and suddenly he realized that what he had been doing was not working. He was talking too much and too fast, trying to fill the silence with words, when what he should have been doing was listening more closely to what others had to say and engaging with their ideas. Later that day, Amir reflected on the meeting. He realized that his approach of speaking quickly and at length wasn't helping his communication. It was hindering it. He decided to change his mindset. Instead of focusing on how much he could say, he would focus on how well he could listen. He realized that effective communication wasn't about speaking a lot or sounding fluent in the traditional sense. It was about making sure that the other person understood his point and that he understood theirs. The next time Amir found himself in a meeting, he consciously made an effort to listen more. Instead of planning out his next sentence while others were talking, he focused entirely on what they were saying. He allowed the conversation to flow without rushing to fill every pause. When it was his turn to speak, he spoke slowly, making sure to convey his ideas in a clear and concise manner. He didn't feel the need to fill the silence with unnecessary details. Instead, he allowed the space for others to respond, and in doing so, his conversation started to feel more natural. As Amir practiced listening more and speaking less, he began to notice a shift in how his colleagues responded to him. They seemed more engaged in the conversations, and the atmosphere in the meetings became less tense. People were no longer waiting for their turn to speak, but were actively participating and building on each other's ideas. Amir had shifted the dynamic simply by focusing on listening more attentively and speaking with more intention. One of the most powerful effects of Amir's change in approach was that he became more respected in meetings. Before, people would often tune out or become confused when he spoke too much, but now, when Amir spoke, his colleagues listened. They could tell that he had been paying attention to their ideas and that he valued their input. His responses were more thoughtful and relevant, and he wasn't just filling the air with words. He was contributing meaningfully to the conversation. Amir's newfound ability to listen not only improved his communication at work, but also helped him build stronger relationships with his colleagues. They began to approach him for advice and feedback because they trusted his judgment. His reputation as someone who was thoughtful and easy to talk to grew, and he became more confident in his role. He no longer felt the need to prove his fluency or knowledge by talking excessively. Instead, he embraced the power of listening and speaking thoughtfully, knowing that this was the key to effective communication. As Amir continued to practice this new approach, he noticed that his English skills improved in other areas as well. By focusing on listening more closely, he became better at understanding different accents and nuances in speech. He was able to pick up on subtle details that he had missed before, and when it came to his own speaking, he became more deliberate. He realized that fluency in English wasn't about speaking quickly or using big words. It was about being able to convey your thoughts clearly and confidently, while also respecting the other person's chance to speak. Now, Amir finds that his conversations are much more enjoyable and productive. He no longer feels the need to dominate every discussion. Instead, he listens with intent and speaks when it's necessary to add value to the conversation. His colleagues appreciate his calm demeanor, and they're more likely to engage with him in a meaningful way. Amir has learned that effective communication is not just about the words you say, but also about how well you listen and how you use pauses to gather your thoughts before responding. The lesson that Amir learned was a valuable one. Communication is a two-way street. It's not just about expressing your thoughts, but also about creating an environment where others feel comfortable doing the same. By slowing down, listening more attentively, and speaking with purpose, Amir not only improved his fluency, but also his ability to connect with others on a deeper level. His conversations became more natural, and his relationships with colleagues strengthened as a result. As we dive deeper into the process of improving communication, it's important to pause for a moment and reflect on your own habits and practices. This can be a great opportunity to take a step back and ask yourself some key questions that will help you assess where you are and how you can continue to grow. We often get caught up in trying to be perfect when speaking a new language, but communication is more about connection than perfection. So, let's explore some reflective questions that you can use to evaluate your progress and identify areas for improvement. First, ask yourself, do you speak in a way that is clear, or are you trying to be perfect? Many people, especially when learning English, fall into the trap of thinking they need to speak flawlessly. They focus on using perfect grammar, saying things exactly the way they learned it, and avoiding any mistakes. However, this often leads to frustration and can create unnecessary pressure. What happens when we try to be perfect is that we often lose the natural flow of conversation. We may hesitate, overthink, or even avoid speaking altogether because we're worried about making mistakes. The truth is, nobody speaks perfectly all the time. And honestly, it's okay if you make mistakes. It's part of the learning process. The most important thing is to be clear. Clarity is what helps others understand you, and it's what allows you to connect with them. If you can express your ideas in simple, clear sentences, people will understand you, even if there are small mistakes. So, instead of aiming for perfection, focus on communicating your message as clearly as possible. Are you allowing yourself to focus on clear communication, or are you caught up in the fear of making mistakes? Next, consider this. Do you practice English in your daily life, even if it's just for 5 minutes? Consistency is key when it comes to language learning. It's not about studying for hours every day, but about incorporating small practice sessions into your routine. Even 5 minutes of practice each day can make a significant difference over time. Maybe you spend those 5 minutes repeating a sentence or two you learned, practicing your pronunciation, or listening to a short podcast or video in English. You don't need to dedicate an entire hour to practicing every single day. Instead, think about how you can integrate these short moments into your daily life. Think about your day-to-day activities. What could you do in the 5-minute gaps that would contribute to improving your English? Perhaps you could describe what you see around you in English, narrating the actions you're doing or the thoughts you have. You could practice greetings or small talk with a colleague or a friend. These small moments of practice add up and will make you more comfortable speaking and thinking in English. So, ask yourself honestly, do you make the time for even a brief moment of practice every day? Finally, let's take a look at how you can continue to improve. Reflect on this question. What can you do today to improve your communication? There's always room for growth, and you don't have to wait until tomorrow to start making changes. Think about one small thing you can do right now, today, that will push you closer to better communication in English. It could be as simple as setting aside 5 minutes to practice speaking aloud, listening to a conversation in English, or using a new phrase in your next conversation. It doesn't have to be a big, overwhelming task. The key is to take action. Perhaps you can challenge yourself to use English more often in your daily life. If you usually think in your native language, try to consciously switch to English, even if you're just thinking about your plans for the day. Or, if you often feel nervous about speaking in English, challenge yourself to start a small conversation with a colleague or friend. By taking action, no matter how small, you'll make progress and see improvement. These questions are meant to help you reflect on where you are right now and think about what steps you can take to continue improving your communication skills. It's important to be kind to yourself during this process. Language learning isn't a race, and everyone has their own pace. What matters is that you continue moving forward, even if the progress seems small at times. If you can focus on clear communication, find small ways to practice daily, and take action today, you'll gradually notice improvements in your ability to express yourself in English. Remember that improving your communication skills is a journey. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be consistent and committed to making progress. Keep practicing, keep reflecting, and most importantly, keep connecting with others. Communication isn't just about speaking. It's about creating meaningful connections, whether it's in a meeting at work, a conversation with a friend, or a chance encounter with a stranger. By focusing on these small but impactful actions, you're on your way to becoming a more confident and effective communicator in English. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of the English Talk community. It's always a pleasure to spend this time with you, and I hope you found the tips and stories helpful in your journey toward better communication in English. As we wrap up, I want to encourage you to take action. It's easy to listen and feel motivated, but the real progress happens when you apply what you've learned. So, my challenge for you today is to pick at least one tip from this episode and put it into practice. Maybe you'll try speaking a little slower to give yourself more time to think. Or perhaps you'll focus on using simpler, clearer sentences the next time you speak in English. Whatever it is, take that first step today. And remember, your English doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be understood. That's the key. It's not about speaking flawlessly or impressing others with your vocabulary. It's about connecting with people and being understood. And when you focus on that, you'll find that your confidence grows and your communication improves naturally. If you found value in today's episode, I'd love for you to continue your learning journey with us. You can listen to the next episode for more tips and strategies, or you might want to share this episode with a friend who's also looking to improve their English. You never know. By sharing, you could help someone else take that next step in their learning process too. Thank you again for being here with me. I'm really proud of the effort you're putting into your English. Keep practicing, keep applying what you learn, and most importantly, enjoy the process. I'll be here with more tips and stories to help you along the way. Until next time, take care and keep communicating.